There was once a simpler time in gaming, when overrated battle royale games and broken live service titles were non-existent. The genre that dominated the early 2000s was a 3D platforming genre. Ever since Super Mario 64 came down from the heavens, every other gaming studio and company attempted to create their own title to add to the polygonal pantheon. Pac-Man is one such example. Originally a firm believer in Wicca Wacca, Namco converted their circular savior into polygonal theism. What were the results? Well, it certainly turned out better than Bubsy 3D. Can't go lower than the 9th circle of Bubsy 3D. Pac-Man World 20th Anniversary, or Pac-Man World for short, wasn't originally the game that it is today. It was originally an open-world action-adventure game called Pac-Man Ghost Zone. To make a long story short, it was scrapped and reworked into Pac-Man World. I'm guessing it's because the game had tank controls, and a platformer game with tank controls just doesn't work, period. Just ask Bubsy 3D.
Stupid old game, you stink!
Pac-Man World made its debut onto the PlayStation 1 on October of 1999, and would also get a Game Boy Advance version 5 years later. What, did Namco want to make its own cinematic Pac-Man universe or something? Well, at least they got a cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The game did remarkably well, and was praised on most of gaming's important qualities, which I will break down like a ghost after it's been chomped. It also received a couple of sequels, and a kart racing title. What, did Namco want to jump onto that mascot go-kart bandwagon too? Oh. Huh. Like most 3D platformers, jumping across colorful environments are a standard issue, and while Pac-Man isn't exactly known for jumping in his arcade days, he does an admirable job in Pac-Man World. He's no Mario, who can jump in as many ways as Willy Wonka's elevator has buttons, but he still makes an identity for himself. Pac-Man's moveset consists of being a basketball by jumping and bouncing repeatedly for extra height. He can also rev roll, where he runs in place before rolling forward with speed. Hang on, he's emulating Mario and Sonic now? Pac-Man is also capable of weaponizing the Pac Dots he collects into projectile attacks. The smaller and mostly sufficient single bursts take out most enemies, but for the more obnoxious ones, charging up and unleashing the same attack tenfold will wipe them out. That's somewhat original. Pac-Man can also swim underwater and hold his breath indefinitely. Take that, Sonic! He can interact with this world by sitting on switches of different colors that do different things. Rev rolling on stationary or airborne platforms to make them move, glow in the dark, eat ghosts after eating a power pellet, trademarked, and bounce off bee-dongs, which are basically trampolines. Wait, they're called bee-doings and not bee-dongs? Probably should have spaced that one letter out a bit more. Makes it sound like something else that Pac-Man is intentionally sitting on. In the world of Pac-Man, there are doors that open with more than just keys. Fruits and bells and Galaga symbols are needed to unlock the contents of these gateways. Some contain letters to Pac-Man's name, which lead to bonus levels. Others carry switches to progress through the level. A few contain next to nothing of value or importance, especially on repeated playthroughs. Lastly, there are a couple of power-ups that Pac-Man can pick up. One is a seldom seen energy bomb something. A single butt bounce is enough to wipe the screen of nasty streaks and enemies. The other is the more common and far more useful KROME ball. With it, Pac-Man turns metallic and is invulnerable to damage. Also, he can move underwater as if on land, allowing him to break open boxes if he's quick enough before it wears off. I guess imitation is the best form of flattery. For a platformer on the original PlayStation, the graphics aren't impressive by 2020 standards, but with the PS5 and Xbox Series X out at the time of this video, or for 1999, they're pretty damn good. The level design all share the same interactable objects that tie them to the overall gameplay, but they all blend well with their corresponding zone. The door design, the enemies in each level, especially the trademark ghosts that always return after being chomped, the boxes that are opened, the hazards that will kill you on more than one occasion, and the design of the mazes that you can access by entering the Galaxian doors. It's all colorful and exactly what gives a 3D platformer its identity. I'm particularly fond of how there's a depiction of Pac-Man in some of these levels as well, from the skull of Pac-Man to the Pac-Man shaped windows and platforms, though I can't help but wonder what that is on Pac-Man Earth. 20th anniversary, more like 20th leitmotif, and I thought Undertale had leitmotifs up the Goatbomb's ass. Stop! Don't get the wrong idea here. This is just one of two nitpicks I have with this game's soundtrack, which is composed by Tommy Tallarico, and his resume is rather extensive. The other nitpick I have is that I wonder why the music played in the maze levels sounds as though they're 320 kbps instead of 128 kbps, if you get what I'm saying. This matters to me in my growing collection of video game music. Well, ignoring the leitmotifs and slightly inconsistent audio quality, the music is exceptionally jubilant and ambient for each and every world and level you're in. Each track fits each theme, with genres to match. The pirate levels have swinging jigs, the funhouse levels are bouncy and happy, and the mansion levels are haunting and foreboding. Just to give you an idea, one of my personal favorite music pieces is the two-parter of King Galaxian. The first half makes you feel as though you're embarking on a journey across the cosmos, and the second part is a clear and loving remix of Galaga. Other great examples are how energetic and jazzy the opening title theme is, with its blaring trumpets and rolling pianos. And then there's the final boss theme, which is fast-paced and ominous, sounding as though you need Davy Jones's tentacles to play so many organ notes so quickly. No two music pieces, despite what I've said about leitmotifs, sound alike either, except for the second and third space levels, which do blend a little too much into one another. As the name of the game suggests, Pac-Man is celebrating his 20th anniversary. During the opening cinematic, his friends, family, and loved ones all come with gifts and cake, ready to celebrate and party. But each and every single Pac-Man themed character, except for Pucca from Dig Dug, are abducted one by one. And if you pay close attention to the way they're abducted, you can tell which zone they've been imprisoned in. Though I do have one question. How come the cat looks like a normal cat, but the dog is a Pac-Man dog? Hell, even the hummingbird is Pac-Man themed. Makes about as much sense as seeing real-world fish in Pokemon. Anyway, our titular Pac-Man returns home after what I can only imagine is from working at his job in the Wreck-It Ralph arcade. He returns to see his house ransacked, the party decorations scattered, and the cake surprisingly uneaten. Pretty sure Bowser would have eaten that cake if he was the villain of this game. The only hint as to what happened is a note on there being a party at Ghost Island, where you'll be able to meet Pac-Man in person. At Ghost Island, Toc-Man is alerted of Pac-Man's arrival, and how Miss Pac-Man was mistakenly kidnapped instead of her husband. Or perhaps it was entirely intentional, and the ghosts happen to have a certain lust for the female dot muncher.
What? What?
Jeez, nothing, bitch.
Toc-Man puts on a hit on Pac-Man after hearing the news and sets this game in motion. Pac-Man must rescue his 6 friends and family from 6 different zones, and then confront Toc-Man for the final showdown. Toc-Man is defeated, but it's revealed that he was actually a ghost piloting the mechanical mimic. Luckily for this currently unnamed villain, Pac-Man doesn't hold a grudge for him or his actions. In Pac-Man World, there are a grand total of 23 levels, divided into 16 zones. That basically equates to 4 levels per zone, except for the Ruin Zone for some unknown reason. Each zone has a final level that has a boss battle. Every other level has 1 maze in it, except for Buccaneer Beach. Manic Mines is also the only level that has 2 mazes. Each zone also holds a friend to rescue, with a key needed to free them. And do note that the key isn't always in the same level as the imprisoned member of the Pac-Man family. Lastly, you're free to do these zones in any particular order. Kinda. The Pirate, Ruins, and Space zones are first, followed by the Funhouse and Factory zones, with the Mansion zone saved for last. The first level in each zone unlocks the next one, and clearing the first group opens up the next one. So, with that out of the way, time to savor each and every one of these power pellets. The introductory and tutorial stage. The first level you're forced into when Pac-Man arrives onto Ghost Island. This level is rather straightforward, with all of the hint signs around. The basics are explained here, and outside of a couple of details, gives you enough to let you bounce without training wheels. The second level in the Pirate Zone is your first proper level in the game. In this level, you'll want to kill the parrots and walking barrel enemies before they explode on you. Doors operated by yellow switches will move you up and down. Avoid spikes when underwater, and make the most out of the KROME ball to break open those underwater chests. The one near the end has a key after all. There's a greater risk of falling to your death here than in the last level, and you'll often be relying on the cannon hatches or the elevators to get across. Almost everything on this level feels like it's on narrow footing, and try not to let the boat at the top near the end of the level disorient you. Well, the camera anyway. Rescue Pucca here, and then walk the plank. The boss of the Pirate Zone is a flying boat with a face on its sail. The instant that you go right, HMS Windbag will pursue you and relentlessly fire cannonballs at you. The first wave of this boss fight is to make it to the right without falling, and then during the second wave of the boss fight, You can send those cannonballs back with proper timing on the blue switches. After enough hits, you'll successfully defeat Toc-Man's Majesty's Service Windbag. Spiders, lava, darkness, and traps aplenty. If you don't fear the dark and aren't disturbed by the sounds the spiders make, especially when you squish them, then this level might not be terribly difficult. To avoid the traps entirely, you can jump on the corners or look at the ground closely. To not lose anything in the darkness, hug the walls. And to not use a bell to unlock that one door, just jump below the waterfall. This is actually the longest level in the game, and that might be because there's only 3 ruins levels, and this level has 2 optional mazes in it. There's quite a bit more lava in this level, as well as minecarts that are moving lava around. There are also a few annoying mummy enemies that will kick you, and these Ankh tornado enemies that can't be killed and only outrun. Personally, I've never been a fan of this level. There's quite a fair amount of backtracking, especially when it comes to getting the key to free the Pac-Man dog. Fortunately, there aren't any levels like this one in the rest of the game. This could be one of the hardest bosses in the game, depending on who you ask. The first wave has you running away from the hand of a mummy in a narrow hallway with gates and spears moving up and down to harm you. Move too slow and the hand will bitch slap you to death. You must make it to the end to get to the genuinely hard part of this boss battle. Anubis Rex himself might be that temple that you must rev-roll into its heart 4 times to defeat. You can't touch the face, otherwise you'll die instantly because God of Death and all of his friends. To expose the heart, you must rev-roll on 4 different platforms, and then quickly attack the exposed heart. It starts off simple, but each hit triggers more defense mechanisms that can potentially overwhelm you. Tornadoes, raining fireballs from the sky, and even a laser beam that goes left and right and sweeps the area. You will definitely want to take your time when you get to stage 4, otherwise you'll lose a ton of lives here. The only strategy I can offer here is to make sure you're positioned right on the rev-roll platforms, and to get the outer ones set first. The space zone is actually my personal favorite zone in Pac-Man World. All of the enemies in this zone are aliens. There are lasers and force fields that can be disengaged by hitting switches, floating platforms that tilt if you linger too long on their corners, and rev-roll ramps that will prevent backtracking. Plus that space music is quite catchy. The space music gets better in this level. There's also a hell of a lot more lasers to avoid, as well as platforms to rise up, also with lasers. You'll also be introduced to these blue alien enemies that act defensively in comparison to the mummy enemies in Manic Mines. Luckily, there's a little backtracking in getting the key here to free the professor with. The music might be similar outside of there being more percussion, but this level is completely different than Far Out. There's temporary force fields that you can walk on, platforms that meteorites will destroy instantly, and a shining light that will warp you to the second half of the level. This is actually one of the shorter levels in the game, but by no means is it a chore to complete. Some people might find this level difficult, but I personally find this level to be an absolute blast. This level is basically a crossover of Pac-Man and Galaga in 3D, with music to match. The first wave of this boss fight has you manning the spaceship and shooting away at aliens and asteroids, which drop random fruits that may encourage replaying this level to get a higher score. Then there's this giant structure you're flying over, which ends with a ship parked on the end of it. That's King Galaxian, a crab-like spaceship that starts the second wave of this boss fight. To defeat this cosmic crustacean, you must shoot and destroy each of its eyes, one by one. The more eyes destroyed, the more reinforcements are summoned, and the more they shoot back at you. As long as you understand that you have 3 buttons to shoot with and not just one, you should persevere, though I would recommend pausing if your hand is starting to ache. Circuses were always meant to be psychedelic and colorful, and that's no exception in Pac-Man World. Your first Funhouse level has plenty of flying clowns and bumper car enemies that can be killed by butt bouncing and rev-rolling them off respectively. There's quite a lot of clown decor as well, some sad, some happy, perhaps too happy. Regardless, make sure you don't get distracted by the pretty colors, and try not to get shot. There's quite a fair amount more bottomless pits and hot air blown your way, not to mention conveyor belts and rotating platforms with heat panels on them. Makes you realize just how evil clowns can be, though I will say that the end of this level is memorable. You must time your rev roll to these narrow platforms that converge just long enough for you to get to this theatrical stage. This strangely Hollywood level is considered by many to be the most difficult level in the game. The primary reason why is that there are so many platforms that fall if you so much as step on them, and revolving platforms that impede your momentum if you're not jumping or butt bouncing across them properly. If you're dying often to these basic obstacles, then this level will seem longer than it needs to be, and it's already rather long to begin with, but it's certainly getting points for presentation. It probably kept a caged baby entertained before you rescued her. This is a rather unique boss battle, mostly because it's less boss battle and more racetrack. You basically compete against 15 clowns that are smart enough to race in their own bumper cars rather than pack themselves all into a single car. They tell you that you can't use turbo, but life finds a way. All you have to do is come in first, and try to do so with as high a death count as possible. Do you think Toc-Man was constructed in the factory zone? There's quite a lot of machinery, hot-headed enemies, and magnets here, not to mention poorly maintained pipes that are scorching hot to the touch, and even expelling hot gas at you. Try not to get carried away with butt bouncing the magnets, and you shouldn't have much trouble. Making your way deeper into the factory zone reveals loads more hazardous machinery that you're unfortunate enough to platform across. Rising and falling pistons, conveyor belts with spinning blades and scorching steam, not to mention an underwater trap with robotic sharks. Luckily, as you make your way across a metallic structure, there's an off switch to shut everything off permanently. Thing is, it seems to create a catastrophe in the factory instead, causing heavy gears to fall from the sky and changing the layout of the end of the level, and perhaps setting up what you'll face next. If you're not concerned with collectibles and fighting Toc-Man, then this level is actually rather short. It feels as though this factory zone is beyond repair, but with it being flooded by water and some sort of acid, as well as the gears grinding down and metallic structures clearly damaged. The bulk of this level is spent in the largest underwater segment of the game. 4 levels of hazards, and plenty of chests that require breaking open with a finite chrome ball power-up. If you don't miss a box and rescue your son, you're good to go. The head honcho of the factory zone. This robot can't be reached directly and must be defeated indirectly. To do so, wear the chrome suit and butt bounce on 4 switches to activate a 5th switch, which will drop a huge metal load on the Chrome Keeper boss. Do this 8 times, while simultaneously avoiding magnets when metal, and you'll get your sweet satisfaction by decapitating the defective enemy, the home court of the harmful hallucinations. It's Halloween every day here, and certainly so in the mazes of the Mansion Zone, where there's an extra ghost or two to accompany Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde. The skeletons return, but can breathe fire now. There are bats with huge grins on their faces, and coffins that either shift back and forth or temporarily shrink upon being touched. If you jump back and forth between them, you will save yourself a lot of lives. Could this be where the ghosts were buried when they were still alive? Well, yes, but actually no. Instead, it's filled with spiders and walls that try to flatten you, and even hurt you if you touch them. There's also a lot of sweeping fire and living tombstones. Not the YouTuber though. A penultimate Pac-Man world level, and it's also the level where you rescue the iconic Miss Pac-Man. It's a dark and stormy night in this level, with clouds that double as hazards and platforms for you to hop on. This is also the only level with ethereal coffins for platforms. If you've made it here, then you've pretty much made it to the end. Before the final level is even available to you, you must rescue all 6 of your friends and converse with them in the Ghost Island overworld. If you've been doing that, then the final level is open to you. In this stage, there are ghosts that you can't kill and will act as nuisances for you. Your friends will heal you if you lose health, up to 6 times even, but losing a life will have you start the entire boss fight over. The final boss fight against Toc-Man is a 3-stage boss fight. The first phase has Toc-Man shooting fireballs at you, and even emulating your Pat-Dot shoot attack. Collect the dots and return fire to get him to be pulled in the center of the arena. Stage 2 is Toc-Man switching his style and butt bouncing, which will hurt you if you're earthbound, regardless of where you are in the battlefield. Time your jumps and activate the switches to get him back to the center. You can continue to concuss his circuits, and once you see a red wave after dealing enough damage, you'll get to Stage 3. Stage 3 has Toc-Man practically hound you when butt bouncing, but it's here that Toc-Man will go all out and rev roll into you. There are 2 ways to avoid this move that's easily capable of launching you off of the arena. You can either hustle to the center of the arena and rev roll into Toc-Man when he stops and is slow to get up, or rev roll into Toc-Man as he's charging up to not only cancel his rev roll, but damage him as well. Either way, victory is yours if you drop his health to 0 and see him shrink to your size. The transition from 2D to 3D isn't as seamless as Nintendo will make you think. For every Mario, Metroid, and Zelda, there's a Bomberman, Bubsy, and Sonic. Well, sometimes anyway. Pac-Man falls in the middle of this. It isn't a disaster of a transition, but it isn't an iconic shift either. It's a successful transition nevertheless, one that resulted in a few sequels and kid-friendly spin-offs that more than earned Pac-Man a place in Super Smash Bros. and it's fitting then that it was this version of Pac-Man that got the roster spot. As far as this title goes, it's definitely one of the platforming highlights on the original PlayStation, though I can't say that there's much reward in attempting to complete this game 100%. If you unlock the blooper reel, that's more than enough, and you also can't say no to playing the original Pac-Man arcade game.